I'll never forget the day my grandmother passed away. I was 32 and working as an accountant in a small firm in the city. The news came on an autumn morning, just as the leaves were beginning to change color. She passed away peacefully in her sleep. My mother said on the phone, her voice breaking. Grandma Rose was the pillar of our family. Widowed for decades, she raised 5 children on her own and helped look after all the grandchildren. Her house always smelled of freshly baked cookies, and her stories made us laugh for hours. But there was another side to Grandma Rose that few knew about. She was a shrewd businesswoman who turned my grandfather's small convenience store into a regional supermarket chain. At 85, she was still in charge, although she kept it a secret from most of the family. The funeral was as she would have wished, simple and elegant. The whole family attended, including uncles, cousins, and distant relatives I barely recognized. As I watched the faces around me, I noticed furtive glances and whispers. Everyone seemed to be speculating about the same thing: the will. A week later, we gathered in the lawyer's office for the reading. The tension was palpable. My uncles fidgeted in their chairs. My aunts exchanged nervous glances. My older cousins could barely disguise their anxiety. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a gray-haired man with round glasses, sniffled and began to read. I, Rose Elizabeth Thompson, in full possession of my mental faculties, declare this to be my last will and testament. He continued with the legal details, but I could feel everyone in the room holding their breath, waiting for the crucial part. As for the distribution of my assets, Mr. Thompson paused, looking over his glasses at the room. I leave my entire fortune, including shares in the Thompson supermarket chain, worth an estimated $50 million, to... The silence was deafening. I could see my Uncle George leaning forward, his hands clenching the arms of his chair. My cousin Sarah was biting her lip nervously. For my granddaughter, Emily Thompson. All eyes turned to me. I felt my heart stop for a moment. Me? Why me? The lawyer continued, on one condition, but his words were interrupted by a chorus of indignant voices. My Uncle George stood up, his face red with anger. This is absurd. There must be some mistake. Sarah began to cry, while other family members shouted in protest. In the midst of the chaos, I realized that my life was about to change forever. What did Grandma Rose have in mind? Why had she chosen me? And what was this mysterious condition? At the time, I had no idea of the maelstrom that was about to engulf my life, nor of the shocking revelations that would come to light over the next few weeks. All I knew was that Grandma Rose's legacy was far more complex and dangerous than any of us could have imagined. The commotion in the lawyer's office continued for several minutes. I remained silent, too stunned to react. Mr. Thompson tried in vain to calm everyone down. "Please calm down," he shouted at last, banging the table hard. "There's more in the will that you need to hear." Gradually, the room fell silent, although I could feel the accusing stares of my relatives burning into my skin. Mr. Thompson sniffed again and continued. "As I was saying, there is one condition. Emily will inherit everything, on the condition that she takes over the presidency of Thompson's supermarket chain for a year." My jaw dropped. Me? Chairing a multi-million-dollar company? I could barely manage my own bank account. "That's ridiculous," my Aunt Martha exclaimed. "Emily has absolutely no experience in business administration." "Exactly," said Mr. Thompson, a small smile appearing on his lips. "That's the point. Rose left specific instructions. Emily is to take over without any prior knowledge of the business. She'll have to learn everything from scratch." The room fell silent for a moment, everyone processing this surreal information. "What if she doesn't accept?" asked my cousin Jake, his voice laden with barely disguised hope. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "In that case, the fortune will be divided equally between all the charities listed in the will. No family member will receive a penny." The chaos resumed. Cries of outrage and protests filled the room. I felt dizzy, as if the floor was moving beneath my feet. "Emily," I heard Mr. Thompson's voice calling out to me in the midst of the confusion. "Your grandmother left this for you." He handed me a sealed envelope. With trembling hands, I opened it and began to read. "Dear Emily, if you're reading this, it means I made the right choice. I know you must be scared and confused right now, but trust me, You have more strength and intelligence than you realize. There are things about our family and our business that you need to find out for yourself. Things that even I don't fully understand. Use this year to learn, observe, and, above all, trust your instincts. Remember, not everything is what it seems. Be careful who you trust. Love. Grandma Rose. I looked at Mr. Thompson, who nodded gravely. You have 24 hours to decide, Emily. Do you accept your grandmother's challenge? At that moment, I felt the weight of $50 million and the future of a company on my shoulders. But more than that, I felt the weight of my grandmother's trust. I looked around the room at the anxious and angry faces of my family. What did Grandma Rose know that I didn't? What secrets were hidden in our family history? One thing was certain. If I accepted, my life would never be the same. And something told me that the next 365 days would be the most challenging and potentially dangerous of my life. I had 24 hours to make the most important decision of my life. The clock was ticking. The next 24 hours passed like a blur. My phone kept ringing, familiar ones alternating between pleas and veiled threats. I locked myself in my small apartment, my head spinning with the possibilities and the risks. On the one hand, the idea of running a multi-million-dollar company terrified me. On the other, the trust my grandmother had placed in me intrigued me. What did she see in me that I couldn't see myself? At 9:59 the next morning, I walked into Mr. Thompson's office. All eyes were on me. I accept, I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. What followed was a roller coaster. In a matter of days, I was introduced to the board of directors, signed a pile of legal documents, and moved into Thompson's main office. The reality of the situation hit me at the first board meeting. Sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by seasoned executives, including my Uncle George, who gave me icy stares, I felt like a child playing grown-up. Miss Thompson, began the CFO, a man called Harold, we need to discuss the financial projections for the next quarter. I swallowed, trying to sound confident. Sure, let's see about that. As Harold spoke, my eyes traveled around the room. I noticed exchanged glances, disguised smiles. They were testing me, waiting for me to fail. That night, exhausted and overwhelmed, I was rummaging through my grandmother's desk when I found a small notebook hidden in a false drawer. On the first few pages, I read, "Dear Emily, if you found this, you're on the right track. Remember, observe everything, trust few. There are wolves in sheep's clothing all around you." Turning the pages, I found cryptic notes, mysterious numbers and names I'd never heard before. What did it all mean? The following week, I plunged headlong into business. I spent hours studying financial reports, organizational structures, and market strategies. But the more I learned, the more questions arose. Why did certain suppliers receive preferential treatment? Why had some apparently profitable stores been abruptly closed down the previous year? One particularly frustrating afternoon, I decided to visit one of the unknown stores. Dressed casually and wearing sunglasses, I was observing the customers and employees when I overheard a whispered conversation in the storeroom. "The shipment arrives tonight. Make sure no one other than the usual staff is around." Intrigued and a little scared, I went back to the office. As I entered, I almost bumped into Uncle George hurrying out of my office. "What were you doing here?" I asked suspiciously. He forced a smile. "Just dropping off some reports for you, dear. Don't worry about a thing. We're taking care of everything." That night, lying in bed, my grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Everything is not what it seems. I had taken control of an empire, but I was beginning to suspect that there was much more at stake than just supermarkets and profits. What dark secrets was my family hiding? And how far would they go to keep them buried? One thing was certain. I needed to be smarter, stronger, and braver than I had ever been. Because now I knew my life could depend on it. Over the next few weeks, I delved even deeper into Thompson's business. Each day brought new revelations and more questions. I began to understand why my grandmother had chosen me. As an outsider, I could see things that others, stuck in old habits and loyalties, couldn't or wouldn't see. One afternoon, while reviewing some old contracts, I noticed a strange pattern. Several supplier companies seemed to be connected, all leading to an obscure holding company in the Cayman Islands. Intrigued, I decided to investigate further. That's when I met Marcos, a young analyst from the finance department. He came into my office with a pile of papers, looking nervous. "Miss Thompson," he said quietly, closing the door behind him, "I think you need to see this." The documents Marcos showed me were disturbing. They suggested an elaborate money laundering network operating through our stores. My heart sank. Was this what my grandmother wanted me to find out? "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Marcos, suspiciously. He hesitated. "Your grandmother, she helped me once, when no one else wanted to. I owe it to her. And to you." That night, as I was driving home, I noticed a car following me. My heart raced. Did anyone know what I had discovered? The next day, I found an anonymous note on my desk. "Watch your step. Some secrets must remain buried." The threat was clear, but it only served to strengthen my resolve. I couldn't back down now. With Marcos's discreet help, I started digging up more evidence. We uncovered suspicious transactions, dubious contracts, and a series of accidents involving employees who asked too many questions. But the more I discovered, the more dangerous my position became. At a board meeting, I noticed tense looks and whispered conversations. My Uncle George, in particular, seemed increasingly hostile. "Emily, dear," he said with a forced smile after the meeting, "perhaps you'd better concentrate on day-to-day operations. Leave the more complex issues to us, who have more experience." His voice was soft, but his eyes conveyed a clear threat. That night, rummaging through my grandmother's old notebook, I found a crucial clue. A name and phone number hidden in a code that took me hours to decipher. With trembling hands, I dialed the number. "Hello?" answered a deep voice on the other end. "My name is Emily Thompson," I said, gathering all my courage. "My grandmother, Rose Thompson, told me to call if I was ever in danger." There was a long pause. "I understand," said the voice at last. "Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the cafe on the corner of 5th and Main. Come alone." As I hung up, I realized that I had reached a point of no return. Whoever this person was, they could be my salvation or my downfall. One thing was certain. The answers I was looking for were within my reach, but the price for them could be higher than I had ever imagined. That night, I slept with a chair against my bedroom door and a baseball bat next to my bed. The empire my grandmother had built was turning out to be a nest of vipers, and I was at the center of it. Tomorrow, I thought as I finally fell asleep, could be the day I discovered the truth, or the day I lost everything. The cafe was busy when I arrived at 3 p.m. My heart was pounding as I scanned the place, trying to guess who my mysterious contact might be. "Miss Thompson?" A deep voice sounded behind me. I turned and faced a middle-aged man with gray hair and shrewd eyes.
I'm Robert Caldwell.
"I was your grandmother's personal lawyer for many years." We sat down at a far table. Robert ordered 2 coffees and, after checking that no one was watching us, began to speak in a low voice. "Your grandmother knew this day would come," he said. "She spent years collecting evidence, preparing to expose corruption within the company. Why didn't she do anything before?" I asked, confused. Robert sighed. "The roots run deep, Emily. They involve powerful people, not just in the company, but in the government, the police. Rose knew she needed someone from the outside, someone who couldn't be bought or bullied." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Here's everything your grandmother gathered. Financial records, recordings, names. It's pure dynamite." My hands were shaking as I picked up the flash drive. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Be careful," Robert warned. "There's a reason why your grandmother kept it secret for so long. The people involved will do anything to keep their secrets buried." As I left the cafe, my mind was spinning. The weight of the USB stick in my pocket seemed immense. Back at the office, I spent hours going through the files. What I discovered horrified me. The network of corruption was much larger than I had imagined, involving politicians, judges, and even criminal organizations. While I was absorbing it all, I heard a noise coming from the corridor. It was late, and the office must have been empty. I quickly hid the flash drive and pretended to be working on some reports. The door opened. It was my Uncle George. "Emily, dear, still working?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were alert, scanning my living room. Just finishing a few things, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He approached my desk, picking up some papers at random. You know, I've been thinking, maybe this job is too much for you. Why don't you take some time off? I can take care of everything around here. The threat in his words was clear. I'm fine, Uncle. In fact, I've never felt so in control. Our gazes met, and for a moment I saw something dangerous sparkle in his eyes. Well, if you say so, he forced a smile. Just don't work late. The streets can be dangerous at night. After he left, I let out a shaky sigh. The message was clear. They knew I was close to the truth and they were closing in. That night, while driving home, I noticed two cars following me. Fear squeezed my chest, but I also felt a determination growing inside me. My grandmother trusted me to do the right thing. I wouldn't let her down. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcos's number. I need your help, I said as soon as he picked up. It's time we laid everything bare. The game had changed. It was no longer just about inheriting a company. It was about justice, truth, and honoring my grandmother's legacy. And I was ready to fight, no matter the cost. With Marcos by my side, I spent the next few days drawing up a meticulous plan. We decided that our best chance was to gather even more evidence and then take it all at once to the federal authorities, those who were beyond the reach of the corruption network's influence. Marcos proved to be an invaluable ally. His knowledge of the company's internal systems allowed us to access files I didn't even know existed. Each new document we unearthed revealed more layers of the corrupt scheme. One evening, while we were working late in the office, Marcos suddenly became tense. Emily, I think I hear something. We froze, listening intently. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, getting closer. Quick, hide everything. I whispered urgently. We had barely put the documents away when the door opened. It was Sarah, my cousin, looking surprised to see us. Oh, Emily, Marcos, I didn't know you were still here, she said, her gaze moving from one to the other. Just finishing some reports, I replied casually. What about you? I forgot my bag, she muttered, picking up a designer bag from a nearby chair. Don't work too late, okay? After she left, Marcos and I exchanged worried glances. I think we need to speed up our plan, he said. I agreed. The siege was closing in, and we were running out of time. The next morning, I received an anonymous email. We know what you're doing. Last chance to back out. I ignored the threat and concentrated on our mission. We had scheduled a secret meeting with federal agents for the following day. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, Uncle George appeared in my office. Emily, darling, I'm so glad I caught you. We have an emergency board meeting early tomorrow morning. It's crucial that you're there. Something in his tone alarmed me. Of course, Uncle. I'll be there. As soon as he left, I called Marcos. Change of plans. I think they're preparing something for tomorrow. We need to act tonight. We quickly gathered all the evidence we had collected. As we prepared to leave the office, we heard voices approaching. Damn it, whispered Marcos. It's the security team. They shouldn't be here at this hour. My heart raced. We were trapped. Is there another way out? I asked desperately. Marcos hesitated for a moment, then his eyes lit up. The service elevator. Let's go. We ran down the corridor, the voices getting louder behind us. We reached the service elevator and Marcos frantically pressed the button. The doors opened wide as we saw flashlights turning the corner of the corridor. We entered the elevator and the doors closed just in time. As we descended, I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. What now? I asked, holding the folder with the evidence tightly. Marcos took a deep breath. Now we run, and we pray that we can get this to the authorities before it's too late. The elevator doors opened onto the dark parking lot. We knew that, from that moment on, we were fugitives. But we also knew that we carried with us the truth that could bring down a corrupt empire. With one last look at each other, we ran into the night, determined to complete the mission my grandmother had started so many years ago. The endgame had begun, and the stakes had never been higher. We ran through the dark parking lot, our panting breaths echoing in the silence of the night. The distant sound of voices and footsteps chased us, increasing our adrenaline. My car's over there. I pointed, But Marcos pulled me in the opposite direction. No, they'll be waiting for it. Let's get mine. We got into Marcos's old Corolla and drove off, tires screeching. We had barely reached the street when we saw two black SUVs coming out of the parking lot behind us. They're following us, I shouted, looking in the rearview mirror. Marcos made a sharp turn, entering narrow alleyways to try and lose them. My heart was beating frantically as we dodged the night traffic. Where are we going? I asked, clutching the folder with the evidence against my chest. I have a friend, a journalist, Marcos replied, his eyes fixed on the road. If anything happens to us, he can publish everything. After what seemed like an eternity of sharp turns and dark streets, we finally lost our pursuers. We arrived at an old building on the outskirts of the city. Marcos's friend, a man called Alex, welcomed us with a mixture of concern and excitement. We quickly explained the situation and handed over a copy of the evidence. "This is pure dynamite," Alex muttered, leafing through the documents. "Do you realize how big this is?" "Big enough for them to want to kill us," I replied darkly. We decided it was too risky to stand still for long. With Alex's promise to keep the evidence safe and publish it if he didn't hear from us within 24 hours, we set off again. This time, our destination was the FBI office in the neighboring town. It was our best chance of delivering the evidence directly to the authorities without local interference. The sun was just beginning to rise when we arrived at the federal building. Exhausted but determined, we identified ourselves at reception and asked to speak to an agent. We were taken to an interrogation room where two agents listened intently to us for hours. We handed over all the evidence, explaining every detail of the corruption scheme. "This will take time to process and verify," one of the agents told us. "But if all this is true, you have just exposed one of the largest networks of corporate and government corruption in recent history." As we walked out of the building, a huge weight seemed to come off my shoulders. We did what my grandmother wanted. We exposed the truth. But our sense of relief was short-lived. When we arrived at the parking lot, we saw Uncle George waiting for us, surrounded by men in suits. "Emily, Emily," he shook his head, his voice a mixture of disappointment and anger. "You have no idea what you've just done." I took a step forward, staring at him. "No, Uncle, you have no idea what I've done. It's over. Everything is exposed now." Just then, police cars arrived, sirens on. I saw the panic in my uncle's eyes as the officers began to make arrests. Marcos and I watched the scene, exhausted but victorious. The corrupt empire was crumbling before our eyes. "What do we do now?" Marcos asked. I looked at the horizon, where the sun was rising, bringing a new day. "Now," I replied, "we rebuild. The right way this time." My grandmother's legacy was complete, and my journey, I realized, was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the world I knew crumbled and rebuilt before my eyes. Newspaper headlines screamed about the scandal, calling it the Thompson Affair. The network of corruption was even more extensive than we had imagined, reaching high levels of government and the private sector. Uncle George and several other company executives were arrested. Politicians resigned, judges were removed, and a massive federal investigation was launched. Thompson's, once a respected empire, was now at the center of a media storm. I found myself thrust into the spotlight, alternating between testimony sessions for investigators and interviews for the press. It was exhausting, but I knew it was necessary to clear the company's name and honor my grandmother's true legacy. Marcos, my faithful ally throughout this journey, became a central figure in the restructuring of the company. His integrity and knowledge were invaluable as we navigated the turbulent waters of reconstruction. One day, while cleaning out my grandmother's old office, I found a letter addressed to me hidden in a secret compartment of her desk. With trembling hands, I opened it. "Dear Emily, if you are reading this, it means that you have done what I always knew you could do. You faced the darkness and brought the truth to light. It wasn't easy, I know, but it was necessary. I built this company with the vision of doing good, of serving our community. Over the years, I've seen that vision corrupted by greed and power. I didn't have the strength to fight it alone, but I knew you would. Now, it's up to you to rebuild. Not just the company, but the trust we've lost. It will be a long and difficult road, but I trust you to lead with integrity and compassion. Always remember, the real legacy is not in profits or power, but in the positive impact we make on the world. With all my love and pride. Grandma Rose. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. The letter reignited my determination. In the following months, I led a complete overhaul of Thompson's. We implemented strict ethics and transparency policies. We cut ties with corrupt partners and established new relationships based on integrity. It wasn't easy. We lost contracts, faced public skepticism, and had to rebuild our reputation from scratch. But little by little, we began to see changes. Employees felt more engaged, clients trusted us again, and our community began to see us in a new light. A year after the scandal, I organized a ceremony to rename our headquarters. It was now the Rose Thompson Building, a tribute to my grandmother's original vision. As I cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony, I looked out at the crowd. I saw the smiling faces of employees, customers, and members of the community. Marcos was there, as was Alex, the journalist who helped us. Even some family members who had distanced themselves during the scandal were starting to get closer. This building, he said into the microphone, is not just a symbol of our company. It is a reminder that integrity, courage, and compassion can triumph over corruption and greed. It is a beacon of hope for a better future. As the applause rang out, I felt a sense of peace envelop me. The road had been hard, but it had been worth it. My grandmother's true legacy, a legacy of honesty, service, and positive impact, was alive and flourishing. And I was ready to lead that legacy into the future, one day at a time. 2 years had passed since the opening of the Rose Thompson Building. The company was finally stabilizing, our reputation gradually rebuilding. I was beginning to feel that we were on the right track, honoring my grandmother's true legacy. One Wednesday morning, Marcos rushed into my office, his face tense. "Emily, we have a problem," he said, placing a tablet on my desk. "Look at this." It was an article from a technology blog reporting rumors that Thompson's was developing an artificial intelligence system to optimize its operations. The article speculated about possible unethical uses of this system, including price manipulation and invasive customer tracking. My heart sank. "That's absurd," I said. "We're not developing anything like that." Marcos nodded. "I know, but the rumor is spreading fast. The company's shares have already started to fall." I spent the next few hours in emergency meetings with our PR team and lawyers. We issued a statement categorically denying the allegations, but the damage had already been done. The trust we had worked so hard to rebuild was being shattered. That evening, while reviewing reports trying to understand the origin of this rumor, I received an anonymous phone call. "Did you like our little present, Miss Thompson?" said a distorted voice. "Consider this a warning. Stay away from the expansion project in the South, or things will get worse." Before I could reply, the call was disconnected. The expansion project in the South was an initiative I had recently started. We planned to open a series of markets in underprivileged communities, offering healthy food at affordable prices and creating local jobs. It was a project I knew my grandmother would have loved. I realized that our fight against corruption was not over. New enemies had emerged, perhaps those who benefited from the lack of competition in these areas. The next morning, I gathered my trusted team. "Listen," I began. "Someone is trying to sabotage us. But we're not going to back down. We're going to face it head on." We drew up a plan. First, we would be completely transparent about our technology projects, inviting journalists and ethics experts to review our systems. Second, we would accelerate our expansion project in the South, showing the public the positive impact we were having. The following weeks were intense. We faced more attacks, malicious rumors, attempts to hack our systems, even physical threats. But with each blow, we responded with more transparency and positive actions. We organized community events in the areas where we planned to expand, listening to local needs and adjusting our plans accordingly. We invited NGOs and universities to partner with us, ensuring that our impact was truly positive. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Communities began to champion us. Loyal customers shared their positive experiences. The press began to investigate who was behind the attacks against us. 6 months later, we opened our first store in the expansion project. Seeing the smiling faces of the new employees and customers, I felt a wave of emotion hit me. We were making a difference, just as my grandmother had always wanted. That evening, back in my office, I looked at Grandma Rose's portrait on the wall. "I hope she's proud," I whispered. "The struggle continues, but we're on the right track." As I prepared to go home, Marcos appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Hey boss," he said. "Ready for the next challenge?" I smiled back. "Always, Marcos. Always." Rose Thompson's legacy lived on, facing new challenges, but always true to its core values. And I was determined to keep it that way, no matter what lay ahead. The success of our expansion in the South brought a wave of popularity and respect back to Thompson's. However, with growth came new challenges and responsibilities. One fall afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. It was Sarah, my cousin, whom I hadn't seen since the scandal 2 years ago. "Emily," she said, sounding nervous, "I need your help." Sarah told me that she had started a small organic food company. She was struggling to compete with the big corporations and was on the verge of bankruptcy. "I know I have no right to ask this," she said, "but could you consider a partnership? Or maybe buying my company?" I was surprised by the request. On the one hand, helping Sarah seemed like the right thing to do. On the other, I couldn't ignore the past and family tensions. "I'll think about it," I replied cautiously. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in an in-depth analysis of Sarah's company. The products were of high quality and aligned with our sustainability values. An acquisition could expand our range of organic products and help local farmers. However, the executive team was divided. Some saw it as a business opportunity, others feared it could be seen as nepotism, damaging our newly rebuilt image. Marcos, always my trusted advisor, offered a balanced perspective. "It's a risk," he said, "but also an opportunity to show that we can separate business from personal issues and that we are committed to quality products and sustainability." After much reflection, I made my decision. I called a meeting with Sarah and my executive team. "We're going to make an offer for your company," I told Sarah, "but with conditions. First, the process will be completely transparent. Second, you won't have a leadership role at Thompson's, at least not immediately. And third, we'll create a program to support other small organic producers, not just you." Sarah agreed, thrilled. Over the next few months, we worked hard to integrate Sarah's company in an ethical and transparent way. We launched a new line of organic products and established partnerships with dozens of small producers. The public reaction was mixed at first, with some questioning our motives. But as the positive results became evident, better quality products, support for local farmers, more sustainable practices, public opinion became largely favorable. A year after the takeover, I organized an event to celebrate the success of the Small Producer Support Program. Sarah was there, now successfully managing our organic division. During my speech, I reflected on our journey. "When I took over this company," I said, "I promised to lead with integrity and compassion. That means making tough decisions, balancing business with ethics, and sometimes giving second chances." Today, I see that we are well on our way to fulfilling that promise. Looking out at the audience, I saw proud faces of employees, partners, and even family members who had previously doubted me. I felt like I was finally realizing my grandmother's vision. A company that not only generated profits, but also made a positive difference in the world. As I left the stage, Marcos approached with a smile. "You know," he said, "I think your grandmother would be really proud right now." I nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and determination. The road had not been easy, and I knew that new challenges would come. But now I was sure, with integrity,